Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. Laura had a way of making me feel small without ever raising her voice. It was never outright cruelty, never something you could point to and say, see, there it is. No, it was a slow erosion, a careful wearing down of my confidence, my identity, until I barely recognized myself. I used to be proud of who I was. A software engineer, a problem solver, a man who built things from nothing but logic and code. I had always thought I was someone worth respecting. But Laura had spent years making sure I knew just how wrong I was. I didn't notice it at first. It started as small things, subtle jabs wrapped in laughter. "You spend all day in front of a screen," she'd say, smirking as she scrolled through her phone. "I swear, you wouldn't last a day in the real world." It was a joke, right? Just playful teasing. Until it wasn't. Her dismissiveness spread like a virus, infecting every part of our lives. Whenever I accomplished something at work, she'd wave it off. "That's nice," she'd say, barely glancing up. "But it's not like you're saving lives." At dinner parties with friends, she'd tell stories that painted me as clueless, incompetent. "Ethan tried to fix the sink last week," she'd say with a dramatic sigh. I had to call a plumber after he was done. Laughter would follow, and I'd force a smile, pretending it didn't sting. But it did. The worst part? I let it happen. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that all couples teased each other. I convinced myself that I was the problem, that maybe I was just too sensitive. But deep down, a small voice kept whispering, this isn't normal. The breaking point came at a family gathering. Laura's parents were hosting a barbecue, the kind of event where everyone pretended to be happy even when they weren't. I had spent the entire afternoon grilling, making sure everything was perfect, trying to be a good husband, a good son-in-law. But Laura? She had other plans. As I was flipping the burgers, she stood nearby with a glass of wine in hand, laughing with her sister. "Ethan is so meticulous," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You should see him at work. He double-checks everything like a paranoid robot. I swear, it's like living with a machine." Her sister chuckled. "Well, at least he won't burn the burgers." Laura grinned. "Oh, give him a minute. He overthinks everything. He probably has an entire flowchart on how to grill properly." Laughter erupted around the patio. I clenched my jaw, the spatula tightening in my grip. I forced a smile like I always did. Let slide. Keep the peace. But inside, something cracked. Her father shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't laughing. Neither was her mother. They looked at me, then at Laura, and I realized something. They saw it too. I had spent years convincing myself that this was just our dynamic, that maybe I was imagining things. But I wasn't. Laura enjoyed making me look small. I turned off the grill and set the spatula down. "You know, Laura," I said, my voice calm, controlled, "I don't think I've ever once made fun of you in front of our family." The laughter stopped. Laura blinked. "What?" I leaned against the counter, my heart pounding. "I don't make you the punchline of my jokes. I don't tell everyone how you leave dirty dishes in the sink for days. I don't laugh about how you forget to pay bills on time." Her face darkened. "Ethan, don't be so dramatic." I shook my head. "No, you always do this. You tear me down like it's some kind of sport, and I've let you. But I'm done." A heavy silence settled over the patio. Laura scoffed, taking a sip of her wine. "Oh, come on. You're just being sensitive." I turned to her parents. "Is that what you think?" Her father hesitated. Then quietly he said, "No, it's not." Laura's expression faltered for the first time. I exhaled, shaking my head. "I've spent so much time trying to make this marriage work. But it's you who's been tearing it apart." Laura opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had no comeback. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Laura breathing beside me. She had brushed off the conversation, acting like it was nothing, like I'd cool off and forget about it. But I wouldn't, because something had shifted, and for the first time in years, I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. She just didn't know it yet. The days after the barbecue were tense. Laura acted like nothing had happened, like my moment of defiance was just an anomaly, something she could brush under the rug. She still carried herself like she was the smartest person in the room, still made little jabs, but there was a shift, a hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes when she spoke to me. She knew something had changed. So did I. For years, I had let her control the narrative, let her make me into the joke, the supporting character in her story. But now that I had spoken up, now that I had challenged her, I could see it. It scared her. Because without me playing my role, without me silently taking her ridicule, who was she? A week later, we had dinner with friends, her friends. People she had met through work, the kind who measured success in designer handbags and expensive dinner reservations. I never felt like I belonged, and I suspected that was exactly how Laura wanted it. We sat in a private dining room of an upscale restaurant, the conversation flowing easily between everyone but me. I listened as they talked about stock options, home renovations, extravagant vacations. The kind of things Laura loved to pretend were part of our world, too, even though I was the one keeping our finances grounded in reality. At one point, her friend Amy turned to me. "Ethan, what's new with you?" Before I could answer, Laura cut in. "Oh, he's been so busy," she said, waving a hand. "Working on his little projects, tinkering away in his office." I clenched my jaw. Amy raised an eyebrow. "Little projects?" Laura chuckled. "You know, tech stuff. Computers. He loves getting lost in all that." I set my fork down, meeting her gaze. "You mean my career?" She blinked. "Well, yeah, of course, that pays for this," I said, motioning to the overpriced meal in front of us. "The house. Your shopping sprees. Your spa days." The table went silent. Laura's smile twitched. "Ethan, don't be so sensitive. I'm not." I leaned forward. "I just think it's funny. You love spending my money, but when it comes to what I do to make that money, it's just little projects." Amy cleared her throat. "That's not really fair, Laura." I watched as Laura's expression shifted, her confidence wavering, her mask cracking. She wasn't used to being the one on the receiving end of the scrutiny. She forced a laugh, but it was weaker this time. Okay. I didn't mean it like that." I tilted my head. "Then how did you mean it?" Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. "Can we not do this here?" I smiled, leaning back in my chair. "Sure." The damage was already done. Laura barely spoke for the rest of the night. Her mood visibly soured. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. On the drive home, she was silent, her fingers tapping impatiently against the armrest. I knew her well enough to recognize when she was fuming, trying to decide how to spin things in her favor. Finally, she snapped. "What the hell was that?" I kept my eyes on the road. "What was what?" She let out a sharp laugh. "You embarrass me in front of my friends." I shrugged. "Maybe you shouldn't have belittled me in front of them." Her head whipped toward me. "You are being so dramatic lately." I gripped the steering wheel. "No, Laura. You're just used to me shutting up and taking it." She scoffed. "Oh my God. Are you really going to hold every little joke against me now?" I exhaled slowly. A joke is something both people laugh at. What you do, it's just tearing me down. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she crossed her arms, staring out the window. "You're being impossible." I didn't answer. By the time we got home, she was still sulking. She stormed upstairs without another word, and I let her go. I didn't follow her, didn't try to smooth things over like I normally would have. Instead, I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down on the couch, and turned on the TV. I wasn't playing by her rules anymore, and I could tell she hated it. Something was off with Laura. After the dinner with her friends, I expected more of her usual tactics: silent treatment, passive-aggressive comments, maybe a dramatic monologue about how I was ruining our marriage. But instead, she was careful. She didn't snap at me, didn't throw her usual insults. It was like she was trying to balance on a tightrope, afraid of saying the wrong thing. It wasn't guilt. I knew that much. Guilt would have meant she cared. No, this was calculated. She was watching me, trying to gauge whether I had figured something out. And that was what made me start paying attention. Laura had always kept our house perfect. Too perfect. I used to think it was just her obsessive personality, the need to control every little detail. But now I was seeing it differently. Every day before I got home from work, she made sure everything was reset. The pillows on the couch fluffed just right. The wine glasses washed and put away. The scent of her expensive candles burning, masking the air with lavender and vanilla. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Until I wasn't. One afternoon, I came home early. Laura wasn't expecting me. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and the house was silent when I walked in. But the living room? It felt different. The air was thick like the echo of something that had just happened, just ended. And then I saw it. A second wine glass, still wet on the drying rack. That was the moment I knew. I didn't react, didn't explode with accusations. I just stood there, staring at the glass, letting the weight of realization settle in my chest. Laura was cheating on me. I swallowed hard, forcing my breathing to stay steady. I wasn't shocked. Not really. Somewhere deep down, I had felt it for a long time. The way she looked at me with quiet disdain. The way she always made me the joke. The way she carried herself like she was waiting for something better to come along. And apparently, she had found it. I needed proof. That night, I installed cameras. Small, discreet, hidden in places she would never think to look. One in the living room, near the bookshelves. Another near the staircase. A third one in the kitchen. I told myself I needed to be sure. But I already was. 2 nights later, I had my answer. Laura had gone out for a girls' night, kissing me on the cheek before she left, telling me not to wait up. I played along, acting as if nothing was wrong, even as I pulled up the security feed on my phone the second she was gone. An hour passed. Then 2. At exactly 9:37 p.m., the front door opened. Laura walked in, but she wasn't alone. 2 men followed her inside. I recognized one of them instantly, her personal trainer, the guy she had raved about for months. The other? A man I had only seen a few times before. The mechanic from the auto shop down the street. They were laughing, moving comfortably through my home, like they had done this before. Laura poured them drinks, smirking as she handed each of them a glass of wine. And then, after some meaningless small talk, she led them upstairs. To our bedroom. I sat there, gripping my phone, watching my wife disappear up the stairs with 2 other men, and felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, just cold, calculating clarity. She thought she had won. She thought I was blind. She had no idea what was coming. Laura had no idea I knew. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake? She thought she was in control. The footage sat on my phone like a time bomb, waiting to go off. Every time I watched it, I felt the same cold detachment settle in my chest. There was no sadness, no heartbreak, just the steady, calculated awareness that this was the end. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. Laura had spent years making me feel small, turning me into a joke, parading her superiority around like it was something to be admired. She had mocked me in front of family, cut me down in front of friends, and now? She had turned our home into her personal playground for cheating. She deserved worse than an argument. Worse than a screaming match. She deserved to be exposed. So I planned. The first thing I did was swap out the streaming apps on our smart TV with a looping video of her betrayal. It took me an hour to override the settings, long enough for me to feel the satisfaction settle into my bones. When a moment came, when she pressed play expecting some romance movie to fill the screen, she would see herself. Her smirking face, the wine in her hand, the way she giggled as she led 2 men up the stairs. I made sure the volume was loud. The next step was making sure she had to watch it. I knew Laura was planning a wine night with her friends that weekend. It was a monthly ritual, a chance for her to gossip, to brag, to paint herself as the sophisticated, successful wife she pretended to be. I wanted them all to see the real Laura. So I waited. On Saturday evening, I pretended everything was normal. Laura was in a good mood, sipping on a pre-game glass of wine while she set out snacks and rearranged throw pillows, completely oblivious to the trap she was walking into. She smirked at me over the rim of her glass. "You don't have to hang around tonight, you know. I'm sure the conversation would bore you." I smiled. Oh, I wouldn't miss it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, sensing something off, but before she could question it, the doorbell rang. Her friends arrived in pairs, filling the house with laughter, designer handbags, and the scent of expensive perfume. I played the part of the polite, doting husband, refilling drinks, making small talk, even while I waited for the moment that would change everything. Finally, Laura clapped her hands together. "All right, ladies, movie time." I leaned back on the couch, sipping my drink, watching as she grabbed the remote and scrolled through the menu. She selected the streaming service, pressed play, and froze. The room went silent. Instead of the movie, she appeared on the screen. Laura, in the living room, pouring drinks. The trainer laughing beside her. The mechanic leaning against the counter. A nervous chuckle broke the silence. Laura? What is this? Laura's hand tightened around the remote. I don't know. The video continued. Laura smirking. Laura leading them upstairs. The sound of giggles, of doors closing, of footsteps disappearing into the bedroom. Then the screen cut to black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, finally, one of her friends whispered, "Oh my God." I stood, stretching lazily. "Well," I said, setting my glass down. That was not the kind of movie night I was expecting. Laura turned to me, her face ghost white, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find words. I smirked. "You were right, Laura. I really should have left for the night." Her friends started shifting uncomfortably, exchanging looks, realizing they had just watched something they weren't supposed to see. Laura's voice finally broke through. "Ethan." I held up a hand. "Nope. Save it." I grabbed my bag, which I had packed earlier that day, and slung it over my shoulder. Laura's panic turned sharp. "Where are you going?" I tilted my head. "Oh, I don't know. Anywhere but here." Her voice cracked. "We need to talk about this." I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. "Now you want to talk?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough that only she could hear. "You didn't seem too eager for a conversation when you were sneaking upstairs with two guys while I was out working to pay for this house." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. I turned to her friends, who were still frozen in shock. "Ladies, enjoy the rest of your night." Then I walked out, leaving Laura standing in the ruins of the life she had destroyed. I didn't look back when I walked out. I didn't need to. The image of Laura standing there, stunned and humiliated in front of her friends, was burned into my memory. The gasps, the whispered, "Oh my God," from one of her friends, the way she clutched the remote like she could somehow rewind time and undo what had just happened. It was enough. I had spent years being the fool in our marriage. The patient husband who swallowed every insult, every condescending remark, every jab she made at my expense. But now she was the one left standing there, exposed, helpless, and I was finally free. I drove without a destination in mind, letting the cool night air rush in through the cracked window. My phone buzzed beside me. I knew who it was before I even glanced at the screen. "Laura." I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. Eventually, a text came through. "Laura, Ethan, please. We need to talk." I smirked, shaking my head. Now she wanted to talk? After everything? I locked my phone and kept driving. I checked into a hotel for the night, dropped my bag onto the chair, and exhaled. The room was quiet, unfamiliar, but for the first time in a long time, it felt peaceful. No pasiva agresiva. No cold stares. No walking on eggshells, waiting for the next time she would find a new way to make me feel less. I ordered a drink from the bar downstairs, took it up to my room, and sat by the window, staring at the city lights. A strange thought hit me then. What was I supposed to do now? I had spent so long trapped in Laura's web, so much time trying to make something work that had been broken for years. Now that I was out, it felt surreal, but I didn't regret it. Not for a second. The next morning, my phone was flooded with missed calls and messages. "Laura, Ethan, call me. Please. Laura, I don't understand why you're doing this. Laura, you humiliated me. How could you do that to me in front of my friends? Laura, come home. We can fix this." I read each message carefully, letting her words sink in. "I don't understand why you're doing this." She still thought she was the victim. She still refused to take responsibility. I took a deep breath and typed my first response since the night before. "Me, we have nothing to talk about." Less than a minute later, my phone rang. I debated ignoring it again, but something in me wanted to hear her panic. I wanted to hear her squirm. I answered. "Ethan." Laura's voice was frantic. "Where are you?" I sipped my coffee, unbothered. "Not home." She exhaled sharply. "Look, I get it, okay? You're angry. You made your point. But this? Running away? This is childish." I let out a dry laugh. "Childish? Yes. You're blowing this way out of proportion. You slept with 2 men in our house, Laura. Silence. I continued, my voice deadly calm. You let them drink wine in our living room. You laughed with them. Then you led them upstairs. And you expect me to come home? Her voice cracked. It wasn't like that. I gritted my teeth. It was exactly like that. She sniffed. Ethan, please. We can get through this. It was a mistake, a mistake. I interrupted, gripping the edge of the table. No, Laura. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in an argument. What you did, that was a choice. Her breath hitched. I didn't let her finish. You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. Alone. She inhaled sharply. I love you, Ethan. I clenched my jaw. No, you loved having me as your backup plan. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. For the first time, she had nothing left to say. I exhaled. I'll have the divorce papers sent over soon. Laura gasped. Divorce? Ethan, wait. Click. I hung up. Then, I blocked her number. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just done. The silence after hanging up on Laura was heavier than I expected. Not because I felt guilt or regret, I didn't. But because it was final. There was no coming back from this. No more pretending, no more second chances, no more waking up every morning wondering if today was the day I'd finally be good enough for her. I was done. But Laura? She wasn't. By the time I returned to our house 2 days later, she was waiting. I had booked a hotel while I sorted things out with a lawyer, making sure the divorce process was already in motion before I even set foot back in that place. I had a plan, get in, grab my essentials, and leave. I should have known Laura wouldn't make it that easy. The moment I stepped inside, she was there, standing in the kitchen like she had been rehearsing her lines. The house smelled like freshly baked cookies, her version of an apology. She only ever baked when she wanted something. She turned as I entered, her face carefully arranged into something soft, remorseful. Ethan, she breathed, like she was relieved to see me. I dropped my bag by the door, arms crossed. Don't. Her expression faltered for half a second, but she quickly recovered. We need to talk. I shook my head. No, you need to talk. I need to pack. I walked past her, heading toward the stairs, but she followed. Ethan, please. I know you're hurting, but we can work through this. I let out a sharp laugh. You think I'm the one who has to work through something? You're unbelievable. She flinched. I made a mistake. I turned to face her. No, Laura. A mistake is one bad decision. You did this repeatedly. You planned it. You lied. You brought them into our home. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. A mistake? That's an insult to my intelligence. Her eyes welled up. I was lonely. I scoffed. Lonely? You had me. But that was never enough for you, was it? She swallowed hard, taking a hesitant step forward. I didn't think you cared anymore. You were always working, always in your own world. I needed attention, Ethan. I needed to feel wanted. I clenched my jaw, my patience running thin. And instead of talking to me, instead of saying anything, you decided the best way to fix that was to sleep with not one, but 2 men? She wiped at her eyes. I regret it. Every second of it. I tilted my head. You regret getting caught. Her mouth opened, then closed. I nodded. That's what I thought. I turned and headed up the stairs. She followed. Ethan, just listen. I stopped abruptly, making her stumble back. No, you listen. My voice was low, steady. I have spent years listening to you, letting you walk all over me, letting you humiliate me in front of friends and family, making me feel like I was never good enough. And I took it. I took it because I believed marriage was about patience, about working through the hard parts. I inhaled sharply, my grip tightening on the stair rail. But now, I realize marriage is about respect, and you never had any for me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan, I shook my head. I don't care. Her face crumpled. So that's it. You just leaving. I met her gaze, my voice firm. I already left. I walked into the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing. I didn't rush. I wasn't afraid she'd stop me, because for the first time in our entire relationship, I was the one in control. Laura lingered in the doorway, watching me, her arms wrapped around herself. I don't want this to be over. I zipped up the suitcase, turning to her. You should have thought about that before you destroyed it. She sniffed, then straightened. If you leave now, you'll regret it. I smirked. No, Laura. The only regret I have is not leaving sooner. I grabbed my suitcase, brushed past her, and walked out of the house, out of our house. But it wasn't ours anymore. It never really had been. The divorce process began like a slow-moving storm, silent at first, but with the promise of destruction looming just ahead. I had expected Laura to fight it, to throw every manipulative trick she had in her arsenal at me. But at first, she did nothing. No calls, no texts, nothing. I should have known better than to mistake silence for surrender. A week after I left, I got a call from my lawyer. She's contesting the divorce, he said, his voice calm, but with an edge of warning. She's claiming emotional distress and financial hardship. I laughed bitterly. Financial hardship? She spends more on handbags in a month than most people do on rent. She's requesting spousal support. That made my grip on the phone tighten. She cheated on me. Doesn't matter, he sighed. She's going to try and play the victim. Of course she was. Laura had spent our entire marriage making herself look like the perfect wife while making me look like the absent, emotionally detached husband. She had manipulated our friends, our families, even me into thinking I was the problem. And now she wanted to drag this out, make me pay for leaving her? Not a chance. I spent the next few days preparing. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, the security footage, the texts, the receipts of the gifts she had bought her lovers. I didn't just want to win this divorce. I wanted to bury her in the truth so deeply that she wouldn't be able to claw her way out. The court date arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the meeting room where our lawyers were waiting, and there she was, sitting at the long oak table, dressed immaculately, her makeup done just right, her posture perfect. To an outsider, she looked like the grieving wife, the heartbroken woman abandoned by her cruel husband. But I wasn't an outsider. I slid into my seat across from her, setting down my folder of evidence. She offered me a small, almost pitying smile. "You don't have to do this, Ethan," she said softly. I raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" "Be so cold," she murmured. "We can work this out without tearing each other apart." I exhaled through my nose, then leaned forward slightly. "You brought two men into our house." Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should keep this civil." I cut him off. "No, she doesn't get to play the victim here." Laura's lips pressed together, her confident mask slipping for the briefest moment. "Ethan, I opened my folder and slid a stack of photos across the table. Screenshots from a security footage. Time-stamped. Undeniable. Her face drained of color. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "What is this?" I smirked. "Proof." Silence filled the room. Laura stared at the photos like they might disappear if she blinked hard enough. "This changes things," my lawyer said smoothly, turning to her attorney. "Given the overwhelming evidence of infidelity, my client will not be paying a dime in spousal support." Her lawyer hesitated. "Laura," she swallowed hard, then straightened. This was a violation of my privacy." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Are you serious?" Her eyes snapped to mine, filled with defiance. "You spied on me, Ethan. I installed security cameras in my own house because I suspected something was wrong. I corrected. Turns out, I was right." She exhaled sharply, her fingers curling into fists. She was losing control of the situation, and she hated it. "This doesn't change the fact that I sacrificed so much for this marriage," she said, her voice trembling, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or fear. "I put my life on hold for you." I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. "No, Laura, you put your life on hold for yourself. You spent our entire marriage treating me like I was disposable. And then you proved it." Her lawyer sighed, rubbing his temples. "Laura, we should consider negotiating." Her head snapped toward him. "No, He turned to my lawyer. "What are your client's terms?" My lawyer slid a document forward. "Ethan keeps the house, the assets, and full financial control over his earnings. Laura walks away with whatever is in her personal accounts and nothing else." Her face twisted in fury. "That's insane." I smiled. "That's fair." Her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might break a tooth. But she knew. She knew she had lost. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Laura, if this goes to court, The judge will see the evidence. She inhaled sharply. Then, finally, she let out a slow breath. Fine. My lawyer handed her the paperwork. Sign here. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. She hesitated for just a second, glancing at me. I didn't blink. She signed. Just like that, it was over. I stood first, buttoning my jacket. Take care, Laura. She didn't respond. I walked out of the meeting room, the weight of years of manipulation, humiliation, and betrayal lifting from my shoulders with every step I took. I was free, and for the first time in a long, long time, I won. The first night in my new apartment was eerily quiet. No passive-aggressive sighs from Laura. No tension in the air, waiting for the next sarcastic remark disguised as a joke. Just silence. I stood in the middle of the small but comfortable living room, taking in the space that was mine. Not ours. Mine. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place with an open kitchen and a view of the city. But it felt more like home than the house I'd lived in with Laura ever did. I dropped my bag on the couch and exhaled. This was it. My fresh start. No more walking on eggshells. No more questioning my worth. Just me. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm, without a heavy feeling in my chest. I got coffee from the shop down the street, sat by the window, and watched the city move. I had nowhere to be, no one to answer to. And for the first time in years, I realized how much I had given up trying to keep Laura happy. She had drained me, piece by piece. And now that she was gone, I finally had the energy to start living again. I threw myself into work. With no one at home to criticize me, I stayed late at the office, took on new projects, and started brainstorming ideas I had been too burned out to consider before. My focus was sharper, my motivation higher. Within a month, my boss called me into his office and handed me a promotion offer. You've been killing it lately, Ethan, he said, nodding approvingly. You deserve this. I shook his hand, trying not to let the grin take over my face. Laura had always made me feel like my job was just a job, like it was something unimpressive, something that made me less than the successful husbands of her friends. But now, I saw it for what it was mine, something I had built, something I was proud of. With the raise, I upgraded my apartment, finally allowing myself to enjoy the success I'd spent years working toward. I bought a better car, started working out more, even took up boxing to let out the pent-up frustration I hadn't realized was still lingering from my marriage. And Laura? She wasn't doing so well. I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce was finalized, but I didn't need to. The news traveled through mutual friends, whispers about how she was struggling to keep up appearances, how she was suddenly alone in the social circles she once ruled over. Turns out, when you build your life on status and ego, people lose interest when you don't have anything left to offer. One day, I ran into Amy, one of Laura's friends, the only one who had ever looked uncomfortable when Laura used me as a punchline. She caught sight of me at the grocery store and smiled. Ethan, wow, you look great. I grinned. Turns out leaving a toxic marriage does wonders for your health. She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. I believe it. Then after a pause, she sighed. Laura isn't doing well. I raised an eyebrow. That's so. Amy shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, after everything came out, a lot of people distanced themselves. She lost some major clients at work. Her reputation took a hit. She hesitated. She's been asking about you. I exhaled, shaking my head. She made her bed, Amy. Amy nodded. I know. Just thought you should know. I thanked her, paid for my groceries, and left. But as I drove home, I felt nothing for Laura's situation. No pity, no sympathy, just a quiet understanding that this was karma catching up. And I had no intention of looking back. That night, I sat on my balcony, sipping a drink, watching the city lights. I had thought divorce would break me. There would be some long, painful road to recovery. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.